If I can't see it, it's just not real. I'm a manufacturer. It's all simple stuff. Anywho, so our next speaker.
Talker is fine. I'm happy with talker.
That's true. Our next talker, super eloquent, actually went to school, for which we're very grateful. Nathan's here representing ENGIE, biggest retailer in the world, and it was happenstance that we got the opportunity for Nathan to be able to talk. He was locked out of Victoria for a while, which was very impressive. The Federal Police do not know that at this stage, for which we're very grateful. And he was up here because I think you're helping parents look after the farm, and so stayed up here for a while longer, and they decided they didn't need him at all. And so we get him, so for which we're very, very grateful. So Nathan, what do you do?
Thank you, absolute pleasure. What I was hoping to do today was provide something to you all that was inspirational, that actually talks about a positive future. At the moment, we're living in a situation where the man who became the Prime Minister of the country smuggled a lump of coal into Parliament to try and scare the Greenies. It's easy to get depressed when you look around us. When you look at the impact that the fires have had on our communities, our situations, our country. Climate change is an epidemic that is out of control, and it's easy to get disheartened when you look at that. So my message today is one of inspiration. Hopefully I'm enthusiastic for you and I can inspire you to go on and to continue and to create and go down this pathway. But if nothing else, I hope it's a fun story for you. And it's a story about me and about how my journey to this room here is analogous with the biggest energy company in the world. We're the opposite of a startup. We've been around for about 160 years. Our first major infrastructure project was the Suez Canal, and we're a global company. In fact, our market cap is bigger than Origin, AGL and Energy Australia put together. But I wouldn't blame you if you've never seen our logo before, because in the past, we have hidden behind other brands. So you might know our retailer in Australia, Simply Energy. Essentially, we've stayed in the background, but now it's the time for us to take a step forward. So you will see our logo more and more prominently. You will see our cars driving down the streets. You will see our technicians servicing your offices, your hospitals, all of those kind of facilities management situations. Because the time for action has come upon us. The time to turn the tide against climate change is here now, and ENGIE are going to be the global actors that will support the delivery of all of this. But we can't do it alone. We need everyone to come along with us on this journey. So what I'm going to talk about now is a bit about my story. All of these pictures have something in common. Like most people, like most teenagers, when I was finishing high school, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I was 17, pretty good student, also a pretty good rugby player. I didn't think anything about my future. All I wanted to do was drive my ute and spend the days on the farm. So I went to school and did an agriculture degree, which I did really poorly, not good enough to get into a graduate program or anything, and found myself driving a forklift at a paper mill. That was my job, right there, at Vizzy's paper mill in Tumut. And I don't know if you've ever driven a forklift before, but the world is an amazing place when you drive a forklift. It is simple. All you have to do is pick something up from over here and put it over there, and don't crash into anything along the way. Best job you could ever have. And while I was doing this, my boss, my manager, came down to see me. Bernie was his name, and he walked down and he goes, "Nathan," he says, "you've been to university, haven't you? Oh, there's a job going. We need an engineer. Can you come and be an engineer?" Well, I didn't need to explain to him the difference between a failing agriculture student and one of the top professions of our modern age. But anyway, I came and I checked it out. And what they needed was someone to run the wastewater treatment plant for the paper mill. I knew wastewater treatment. I'd studied agriculture. I'd been working with cows my whole life, which a cow is just a giant waste processing facility. And so I took to that line of work. But what I found was when I applied the theoretical knowledge that I had learned, when I took in all of the lectures that I'd fallen asleep in and subconsciously digested, the world started to make sense. And I thrived in a career where I could put two and two together, where I could take something ethereal, a calculus equation, a theory that I had picked up in junior high school, and apply it to the real world, physics. And suddenly, everything clicked into place. The perfect balance of the universe. What happens on one side of the equation happens on the other side of the equation. Enthalpy and entropy. You don't get anything for free, but you never get what you pay for. And what I discovered was the way that humans are engaging with energy is unsustainable. Not only is it unsustainable, unpalatable, it's just stupid. We dig up coal out of the ground, burn it to create electricity, which we then waste. We needed something that would happen on both sides of the equation. It was at this point that I decided to dedicate my career to renewable energy. A career in renewable energy in Australia in the early 2000s was a cul-de-sac. Nothing was happening, couldn't get a job. If you could get a job, it was probably for a short-term project, incompatible, no future. So what I did was I took my skills, I took my passion, my enthusiasm, and my family, and we moved to Europe. I would hone and refine my skills, my craft, my understanding of the physical world, and bring those skills, bring that experience back to Australia when the time is right. If I'm standing in front of you now, what does that mean? The time is right. It's a very brave man who comes to a sustainability conference and puts up a picture of a coal-fired power station belching smoke with his company's logo out the front. I'm either brave or stupid. You can decide. This was the former world that we used to live in. This is the world where energy was cheap, it was of abundance, it was reliable, baseload generation, it was dirty, it was unsustainable, it was labour intensive. This is the world as it was. In 2015, the largest power company in the world made a decision to divest all of their coal-fired assets. 15 billion euros in assets to divest. Why would they do that? Were they walking on the road to Damascus and suddenly found the Lord? Is it a very clever greenwashing play? We want to appear to be more sustainable. We'll continue what we're doing, but there's more money in the green dollar. The third scenario, climate change is a tidal wave that will decimate our society as we know it. Economies, as they are currently standing in complacency, will be eliminated. We just haven't seen it yet. The question is, are we going to be swept away by this tidal wave? As a company that has hundreds of billions of dollars invested in infrastructure, are we going to let that tidal wave decimate us, or are we going to surf that tidal wave? It comes down to a question of economics. As I'm sure all of you agree, sustainable business is good business. That's what we did. I think it was about $1.5 billion we paid for this power station in the 90s. In April this year, we demolished the stacks, closed it down, changed the face of energy in Victoria and hence the national electricity market forever. We're still committed to this site. We're going to completely restore it and convert it back into farmland and a lake for recreational purposes at a cost of $1.1 billion. This is not a commitment that comes lightly. This is not a play that you make for your shareholders or for your customers or for greenwashing. This is climate change action now that is by extension affecting every single person in Australia. So the world is changing. The world has accepted that renewable energy is the future and that we will have to make this transition. And what we're seeing is this is happening in big business. Sorry, my next slide was, so how did I get to where I am now? So we've made this decision. We've closed Hazelwood Power Station. We've sold Loy Yang B Power Station. We're investing in renewables. Picture number one. Now, as you could probably garner, I'm a fairly confident sort of guy. I believe in myself, and I fancy myself as the foremost environmentalist ever to put on a suit and tie and climb my glass tower in Collins Street. Capital and investment is going to be one of the main solutions to the climate change issue that we have. So when a business like ENGIE called me up and said that they were interested in me working for them, it was like someone telling me that Beyonce had a crush on me. It was what I wanted to do. And it's the convergence of all of these factors that has led to this point here and now. So where I was going to pick up was the world is realising that renewable energy is the future. And you can see some of the biggest brands in Australia. Westpac have a PPA with Bowman Solar Farm, Carlton United Breweries, Melbourne Trams, L'Oreal, Amazon, the biggest brands in the world. And it sounds pretty easy, doesn't it? If you've got a massive ASX 200 company, you can afford to spend a little bit investing in a wind farm. That's a good investment. We've just seen what a good investment renewable energy is, even for us. But how does this trickle down to the mid-tier? How can a relatively successful, well-run shutter manufacturer in the Central Coast make a statement, make the same commitment, without the legal resources, without the financial resources, the commercial acumen that Westpac, Carlton United Breweries, L'Oreal, multinational companies can? We needed to figure out a way that we could bridge this gap between the big end of town and the boots on the ground, the people who really drive the economy. And that was what ENGIE employed me to do, was to solve this problem. The solution had to cover off these three basics. Firstly, complexity kills. You can build the most amazing deal. You can build something that has all the open and shuts and everything that's going to make it work, cover off all your risks. But at the end of the day, you're going to allow these factors to seep into the cracks, and when the water gets into the cracks, it falls apart. The complex power purchase agreements that the likes of Westpac, Coles, Carlton United have constructed are not suitable for most businesses. Next, risk needs to be managed by the most appropriate party to manage that risk. There is no point transferring price risk onto a small business that's going to sink them. If you have a market event in a place like New South Wales and you're exposed to that risk, in Victoria last year, in January last year, we had 3 days of sustained market events. What had happened was a high pressure system had moved over the centre of the state, so we had limited wind resource. It brought with us unseasonably high temperatures. When I say unseasonably high, it was even for Victoria in January, the temperatures were soaring. So the electricity demand was pegged. And we had 2 unit outages in the coal-fired power stations in the east of the state. The market, the electricity market, hit its price cap, and it stayed there, and it stayed there, and it stayed there. The price of electricity in the wholesale market was so expensive that the regulator had to intervene and artificially set prices down so that the economy could continue to function. Otherwise, you would bankrupt the state. Small businesses, medium businesses, even large businesses cannot be exposed to that kind of risk. energy utilities are the best place to manage that level of risk. Finally, it has to pass the pub test, another phrase that was coined by my friend who brought the lump of coal into Parliament. But it's got to be reasonable. You've got to be able to compare it to something. It's got to be compatible with standard procurement processes. And so we built the Retail Power Purchase Agreement to solve this. So what I'm going to do is play a bit of Electricity Retail 101 and talk you through a bit about how a standard electricity contract works behind the scenes. So this is what the gentailers and the retailers do to get power from the wholesale market to your door. Firstly, it starts out in origination. So you've got a contract that someone has written. That could be a power station, it could be a trader, or it could be traded through the Australian Securities Exchange. Then you've got a portfolio manager who brings all of these various things together. They buy all the wholesale power, they'll buy some from here, some from there, and they'll build a shape. And then they pass it through to a company in a electricity supply agreement, and then it's the business or the end user who consumes that. So you've got market exposure there. You're obviously exposed to the flux of the wholesale price, plus its liquidity. What can you buy or what can you not buy? And then you're managing risk on the other side too. How much power is my customer going to use? Because I don't want to buy more than they're going to use, but conversely, I don't want to buy less than they're going to use too, because I'll be exposed to the market. The customer also has a load shape that you need to match, and the risk of default is ever present too. So you basically mash all of these factors together and you get an electricity tariff. And for the business owners in this room, you probably work with a broker and they come to you every couple of years and they say, hey, I've got this great tariff, it's this much, this is how it works, fantastic. You sign on the line and you're completely unaware of all of this that happens here too. What we needed was a renewable solution that was compatible with the standard form here. Businesses are interested in investing in themselves and renewable energy, but they just don't have, it's just not their core business. They just don't have the time, the bandwidth to bottom out all of these issues before they go. So we just basically replaced the origination function with a whole bunch of renewables. So we have a portfolio of wind and solar farms across the nation. With some firming capacity, we have some battery capacity and also some peaking gas supply. So we can create a contract which we can then manage in our portfolio. So the very same function that the energy traders are doing in AGL, Origin, Energy Australia, any of those other energy retailers, we just do the same thing but with renewables. It comes through the same sort of contract that you're used to engaging with, and it's essentially the same end product that you get, a fixed tariff to your meter without that massive complexity that goes behind it. So what I'd say is this is kind of our secret sauce in here, and then at the end result is a tariff that you get. The massive shift though is you're not taking a market position, you're taking a physical position. The prices are backed by assets. It's a CapEx scenario rather than an OpEx scenario. We're also able to manage the customer's load shape, the intermittency between how they use power and how the generator generates power, with some firming calculations. And we agree on how that's all going to work at the start of the contract too. And then by having a whole bunch of different generators, multiple solar farms, multiple wind farms, it means that if something is to go wrong, let's say you've got a cloudy day in northern New South Wales, but a high wind day in another part of the state. We can mix and match and blend that portfolio of generation to make it work for you. So what I've got here now is an example of a deal that we recently did with Hawkesbury City Council. We've also recently done another very large power purchase agreement with a business that is based here in Berkeley Vale, but unfortunately that's still under wraps until we've worked out how we're going to disclose that to the market. But for now, let's work with Hawkesbury City Council. Great business, forward-thinking, but also aware that they need to provide value, or they're accountable to providing value to their ratepayers. We have some agreements with some solar farms in New South Wales. So here we've got origination and a use. ENGIE manages it as the portfolio. So we bring in all the different generators, we trade what we can with the market, we turn it into a product, and then we retail that product through a standard electricity supply agreement with Simply Energy. We bring in some firming capacity because, as we know, sometimes the wind doesn't blow or the sun doesn't shine. Now, one of the beauties of this type of agreement is you're not tied to one particular solar farm. So what this allows us to do is a traditional power purchase agreement is used as an instrument to underwrite the construction and financing of large utility scale assets. We're comfortable managing that risk. That's what we do. We're happy to build the farm, but what it does is the more that we can sell it down, the more we can invest in new solar as well. So in this instance, while we can hedge the council's existing load with existing renewables, we're also able to trade out of that position and use it to invest in new renewables. That's the Silverleaf solar farm up near Narrabri that's currently under development. And the council can do this, and they can trade within our renewable portfolio to find a solution that works for them. And generally it works for both of us too, because A, we want to build more renewables, and B, the customer wants more, they want more diversity in their portfolio. So we've confirmed how much power they're going to be using for the duration of the agreement. We've guaranteed what that shape is going to look like for them, i.e. they're not exposed to run-of-plant risk. And we've also given them some flexible opportunities or choices on how they're going to firm up that agreement, i.e. firming being the difference between the shape of the renewable generator and the shape of the customer's load as well. That's it from me. I hope I was on time, and I'm happy to answer any questions or take any challenges or throw tomatoes.